Good morning. It's Buy the Fact Black Friday, last chance shopping. I am your host, Bill Noble. Yesterday, everybody either sold or was in a state of total despair prior to the Bank of Japan interest rate hike, which was the most telegraphed interest rate change possibly in history. As it was fully priced in the Japanese bond market. It was covered on political talk shows a week ago. And everyone in crypto traded it like it was new news. Now, who's everyone? Most likely, Bitcoin impacted by miner selling. We discussed it. Long-term holders were buying. So the sellers might have been miners, foreign adversaries of the United States, and people still liquidating from this Binance disaster in October. Their market-making mechanisms were most likely hacked, and somebody clearly had huge losses in altcoins. They had to sell Bitcoin. There were like 3 or 4 exchanges, 3 or 4 market makers who sold 5,000 Bitcoin apiece. Like 20,000 Bitcoin, just absolutely hammered Bitcoin yesterday, and they couldn't really break it. They couldn't break it at all, in fact, with that kind of volume. Now, of course, you've seen all the tweets about long-term holders reaccumulating. Okay. So I think it's very important that they could not break Bitcoin. Now, you're probably wondering what this means for the rest of the month and in January, and I'd be happy to tell you. But first, okay, I'm your host, Bill Noble. Please subscribe to the channel. We light this thing up pretty much every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern. We are on YouTube, TikTok, and now Twitter is on fire for our morning market update. So make sure you follow the channel. Make sure you subscribe and follow on Twitter, so you get all the best information out there. And if you really want the good stuff, if you want the charts showing you all the stuff I'm talking about Ethereum versus Bitcoin or Zcash, Patreon has got all those charts. And the YouTube member area is not only ready for this year, but they're ready for all the wild stuff that's going to happen next year. Like, will next year be much better for crypto? Will it be the dream come true, or will it be a nightmare? Or something else? Tune in to Toby Ward to find out. Now, back to the market. Buy the fact. So, evidence that this thing was totally ridiculous and is now going the other way, majorly, for a Santa rally. Number one, Zcash up 10%. Zcash bounced off support at 350. Right? They looked like they were going to break Zcash. They looked like they were going to break Ethereum. And then it turns around and goes the other way hard. Now, Bitcoin may only be up 2% the morning of the 19th of December, but that's okay because honestly, Bitcoin never went down. And I still think one of our earlier reports where the actual range could be 88 to 98, and we've got bigger ideas of where this thing can go because there's a very unique Gann formation discussed in detail in Patreon. Last night was the new moon. This could have been the depths of despair as everybody sold for fear of the Bank of Japan, which again was telegraphed. So further evidence that this thing was essentially insane on the downside is that people don't realize that what's going to be followed by this rate hike from the Bank of Japan is basically more stimulus, helicopter money, and more QE from not only them, but us too. Everyone has forgotten about this. The Fed was not supposed to be doing QE. Now they're doing $45 billion a month, and they're calling it something else. It's actually so powerful that the regional bank stocks that are more or less should fail have short squeezed dramatically. 2025 will go down 2 words. 2 words. P&L destruction. Everything that everyone was long, crypto went down. Everything that everyone was short, bank stocks went up. Now, tech and AI, they had lots of fun over on Robinhood, but everyone else got destroyed, at least in crypto. So crypto lived through the indignity of alt season on Robinhood and gold and silver. It could not have been worse. It could not have been psychologically, especially when we came into this year with total euphoria and we ended it yesterday with absolute total despair. We came in with the orange man's meme coin and everyone going crazy. And this year they gave up on this stuff like literally like it was all going to zero. Nothing is going to zero. If anything, things like XRP at $1.88, you know, XRP was probably dragged down by Solana and that Solana lawsuit, because I think that was kind of the end of altcoins when that news came out. So XRP got dragged down with Solana. I would also not be surprised to find out who's selling XRP when they have $1 billion going into their ETF. I'm guessing that's Ripple. As usual, there's no intellectual curiosity as to who is selling XRP. I don't want to point fingers, but XRP should not be below $2. And if it is, it's because someone is unleashing on it. Now, maybe it's some market maker that got hurt. But again, XRP is really kind of too big to fall apart like that. So again, XRP at $1.88, especially with Solana being completely out of favor with this serious pumped out fund lawsuit, you know, ETH below 3,000. ETH is still below 3,000. I got news for you, folks. When you have a lawsuit like this, Wall Street is going to see that as a compliance problem. Now, I know, like the head of Multicoin Capital, when he talks about Solana, he calls it internet capital markets. Okay, well, you can have internet capital markets as long as you're not getting sued. As long as you're not getting sued, right, for everything that the pumped out for the Solana treasury holds. Okay, so yes, can they squeeze shorts in Solana? Right. But this opens the door, I think, for ETH and XRP. XRP and ETH now have a story thanks to the Solana pump lawsuit. So I have no idea what ETH is doing below 3K. JP Morgan launched a money market fund on ETH a year ago. That would have sent ETH to 5,000. People would have gone crazy. It's like it didn't even happen. It didn't even happen. And again, that's how you know it's a bottom, frankly, because all the good news was ignored. There was no good news. There was just down only and fear of something that people just didn't understand. They didn't understand that whole Bank of Japan thing was priced in. And now I think the reason that they did it, it's actually shocking that they did it, but the fact that they did, it's just going to bring in more QE later from them and us. I mean, if you look at how the bank stocks rallied, I mean, can you believe the absurdity, right? Like, you know, the battle cry in crypto is long Bitcoin, short the banks. Okay. And here is a chart. I don't, you know, this may not go perfect. I don't care because it's so absurd. I have to show it. Okay. This is a chart of regional bank stocks since the Fed came out and did QE, not QE. Straight up. This is the S&P Regional Banking Index. So basically all the banks that should fail or have major problems, all of them, straight up from 58 to 67 as crypto crashed, right? You put crypto up here just for laughs, right? Bear with me. You put crypto up here. against the banks. Banks straight up, Bitcoin straight down. Nowhere can you see both indignity and insanity like that. This, of course, includes the DeMark 13 bottoms in Bitcoin, which are in place on the 4-hour chart and on the daily chart. In other words, you need 1 or 2 up days back-to-back in Bitcoin for a major bottom to be in on daily charts. Want to thank Ronak for the super chat, 5 sterling. Thank you. Brian with the super chat. He's very bullish on Ghost. You know, I know the antivirus guys are going to be coming out with Matrix next year. And of course, this privacy thing, one of the other reasons you know that a major bottom is probably in is that Monero never went down. There really was market leadership. You didn't notice it because everything looked like it was going to zero, but Monero and Bitcoin never really moved. I mean, certainly Bitcoin did not move like, you know, alts did. And oh, by the way, silver never backed off of 66. It's trading just under there now. As a reminder, if silver acts like GameStop at the end of the year, that can also ignite crypto. Now, I've told you about all this already. There are a lot of technical analysis reasons, namely that the market was just so depressed and suppressed. There's the Gann analogy where, you know, you have 3 or 4 Gann things going on at once that would indicate that the trend would reverse. And one thing you have to understand is that everyone on Twitter is trying to tell you that this is some kind of cycle top. And my attitude continues to be, what cycle? In other words, when you looked at the price action on December 18th before the Bank of Japan, somebody rightly noted that this is not a cycle top. This looks like 2018, where people are just panic selling for reasons that they don't even know. You know, it's large players, someone's getting liquidated. Great. And when the last person's out, you'll know it. Like I said, Zcash up 10%. Bitcoin, I picked 85 on a YouTube thumbnail title. Guess what? 85 held. I got that from one of my models. You know, that's the stuff that feeds Patreon and the YouTube member area. So, I mean, you're sitting here looking at this going, well, can I trust this? And of course, the answer in your mind is no. You don't want to trust it. I mean, I think you could really get excited about Bitcoin on an obvious close above like 90. Like that would probably get it going. And I'm sure everyone's going to say that. But I think the real number is ETH at 3K. In other words, if you have Bitcoin back above 90 and ETH back above 3K, you have a major psychological boost to this market. Now, of course, no one will believe it. And of course, it's not a bull market unless people are willing to pay higher prices. The first test is people have to be willing to buy it when it's up, right? They have to be like, oh my God, I missed out. Now, you also have to be able to buy a dip and then have it not continue dipping, obviously. So we're going to do a little check. Do people want to pay 90 for Bitcoin or 89 for Bitcoin because they think it's going to go to 105 and attack the 55-week moving average? Remember that? Everyone's like, oh my God, it broke 105. Okay, well, let's just say it is a breakdown. Here comes the retest of 105. Who's talking about that? Nobody. Now, nobody's talking about that because like you had all this weirdness in Bitcoin where, you know, at like 10 o'clock every morning or at the same time every morning, East Coast time, they would smash the market. So it would be like some sort of algorithm went off. And that's what crypto devolved into. Some stupid algorithm that, you know, at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning just started selling Bitcoin because people got to get out. And when the last person is out, you'll know because it'll go right back to 105. But if you're selling crypto right now, where are you putting your money? Are you putting it in bank stocks? The Fed had a nice little short squeeze. And why do we, and what happens after you have a short squeeze in stuff where there's a problem, right? Everyone was long crypto. They got forced out. Everybody was short the banks. The banks went up. Everybody was long Oracle. Did you know Oracle is now down 50% off of its high? Oracle is down 48% off its high. And there's all this talk, it's like 12% chance based on the bond market that they can't pay their bills. And, the whole AI trade has flipped hysterical on the back of Oracle, which is funny because starting December 15th, you normally have a Santa rally in equities, right? Normally, like I said, this is the bullish period for stocks where you don't fight the quiet market. Now, if equities don't go down, VIX, the fear index over there is at 16 because it's the holidays. The top of VIX on the last two panics was like 28. You know what I'm saying? So there's no fear over there right now. Now, next year will probably be a different story. And I understand that, you had tax loss selling and things like the Bitcoin ETF or any other crypto product. But most of the time, tax loss selling, particularly since Europe is headed for vacation. Europe and America, Europe is probably done already. Everybody's done after today. Everyone's done. Like no one's going to be in the office. No one's going to do a big thing. If somebody had to do tax loss sell or clean up a fund, they're doing it today after options expiration. And then that's it. So it's left to people going, hey, these stocks, do I want my tech stock to behave the way Oracle did? Or do I want to buy something down 30%? Because eventually, when the tax loss selling is done, someone's going to look at Bitcoin and go, oh my God, I got to allocate money over there. Everybody is focused on ETF outflows. Don't focus on the tax loss selling. Raoul Paul said it perfectly. Don't focus on all this forced altcoin liquidation. We know what it's from. We know that some market maker got caught and just couldn't get out of their positions. That's why everything was down only. That's why Bitcoin was down only. Miners were selling Bitcoin. So 2025 will go down as the year of all sellers. Like Michael Saylor was the buyer and everyone else was the seller. Everyone. And retail, unfortunately, had to sit and watch it just go all the way down in pain that was unbelievable. But from great pain comes great opportunity, I think, starting now. And I went on and on and on last week, really to no avail, about QE, about the fact that the Fed is doing it, and that is like not priced into the market, right? Like Crypto Pop says, Aero is back at the 2024 low. Oh my God, I didn't even realize that. Aero went from $1.20 to 48 cents. That's the DEX on base. Now, I don't know if that's because of a fundamental change with Coinbase. I don't know why all of a sudden everybody gave up on that particular DEX. It's most likely got something to do with the fact that everyone probably gave up on ETH. And I think the other absurdity, which has actually got a pretty bullish chart to me, is SUI. In other words, if there's a fundamental problem with Solana, even if SUI is vaporware, there's an argument. There's a story. And I don't understand why no one is interested in that story. Well, you know why. Because of down only, right? And, down only sometimes can turn around and become up only. Because, the Fed cutting is only beginning. It's only beginning. You have the Bank of Japan who just raised rates to the highest level in 30 years. And I think they're still going to have to do stimulus. They're handing out checks to the soldiers. They're going to hand out checks and tax refunds next year. The Crypto Clarity Act is definitely going to get done. Both parties in the United States need that. They need to get the Clarity Act done, and then they need to really crank up QE, right? DCA all the way. Where is Big Rich? That is a good question. We have to send a search party out for Big Rich, welcoming T-Bone and all of our YouTube members. Welcome, right? Doomberg is reporting that, the job market's terrible. No doubt they're super interested in bad news to embarrass the orange man. But again, when you look at the front page of Bloomberg, you don't see one word about crypto, right? They're paying $8,000 to get into World Cup soccer, but nobody wants to talk about Bitcoin. Like I do a silver video on TikTok. Like one of them, the silver black swan, has 32,000 views, which is a lot for the new TikTok. A lot. Everybody on commodities. Okay. Goldman's record-setting rally and persistent weakness in crude oil have been two standout features of global commodities, right? So gold straight up, oil straight down. Okay. They flagged natural gas prices as the largest ever wave of supply, and there's no copper. So there's either no commodities like copper, silver, gold, or there's way too much commodities like oil and natural gas. Now, why am I bringing this up? Bitcoin originally was classified as a commodity. I know I always talk about it as a future of money, as a currency. You can also look at it as a commodity. Now, as a commodity, obviously, Bitcoin dramatically underperformed silver and gold. When you look at the catch-up rally that could occur in Bitcoin versus gold and silver, like if gold goes to 6,000 or 5,000 and silver goes to 100, now that the Bank of Japan hysterics are over, where does that put large cap cryptos? Where does that put the privacy trade? Buck 52,000 greeting Earthlings. What's going on? If you consider the gold silver catch-up rally, you can have breathtaking price action. Now, could December to January be a warm-up of what happens next year? Frankly, I think so. In other words, one thing that Bitcoin hasn't really shown anybody, and I think Zcash may also be on the list of things, that can post a really good market reminder as to what crypto is capable of on the upside. No one remembers this. No one remembers what Bitcoin can do in a mania. We were pounded into sand to such a degree, okay? To such a degree that we can't even imagine the upside. And even the guys that are bullish are bearish. For example, Tether CEO warns AI bubble is Bitcoin's biggest risk in 2026. Okay. Now, to a certain degree, obviously, if NVIDIA and all these big stocks wound up getting washed out the way Oracle did, yeah, okay, that's going to drag down Bitcoin. Maybe. Keeping in mind that those stocks were up only all year while Bitcoin was down only. I'm not even going to take you through Bitcoin versus Palantir or ETH or Solana versus Palantir, right? Because it's like, everything 10 and 20x and everything else went down. And frankly, that includes even the Bitcoin treasury stocks. So everyone's worried about an AI bubble. I think you should worry about what happens if there's what they call in economics an exogenous event, like a war or a geopolitical conflict. And I'm not talking about Venezuela, or I'm talking about Venezuela where they actually shoot back. That's not priced in anywhere, right? If you have something that comes out of nowhere, that might impact stonks and that would impact Bitcoin, but that could also wake everybody up. So this whole thing, like, Bitcoin is in trouble because of the AI bubble. No. Bitcoin is a part of the AI trade. It's a part of the trade for the future, and no one in legacy owns Bitcoin. Like, that's the thing you have to keep telling yourself when this market looks like it's going to zero, right? In other words, you can't say, oh, gee, because of Oracle, Bitcoin is down. In other words, if anything, anybody who's looking at their tech stock and worry it's going to behave like Oracle has to start looking at things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, particularly since the next time a big stablecoin company or a big bank jumps on Ethereum with a money market fund. That's where the stablecoins are going. That's not priced into ETH at all. So Tether, who owns Bitcoin and gold and is like the backbone of stablecoins and crypto, is worried about Bitcoin. Everyone's worried about Bitcoin. Stop worrying about Bitcoin. Stop worrying about these large cap cryptos. Yes, Solana's got a lawsuit, so maybe that's not included. But when you're talking about the rails of Web3, stablecoin trade is active, silver's going to 100. I mean, there's an AI meme coin. I think it's called Pippin that went to like $400 million market cap. So yeah, that's probably algos and hedge funds and, you know, however that happens. But there is a very small amount. You only need a small amount of that mania, of that like real good feeling coming back before people start FOMOing in on a Santa rally. In other words, no one's going to believe the first rally, and maybe they're right. No one's going to believe the first rally, but you know what? If you see the third or the fourth rally, you better believe that. You better believe that, because that means the four sellers are out of ammo. And I don't know why the four sellers wouldn't be done by the end of today. It feels like they couldn't wait. They couldn't control themselves. And I understand that. Like if you were panicking, if you had positions that you had to liquidate, you were sitting there going, you know what? If I don't do this before the Bank of Japan announcement comes out and they nuke everything, then I'm going to get fired. That's why there was all that selling, because all those trading desks, nobody was willing to take the risk that it was going to be by the fact. That's how emotionally charged it was. And that is the hallmark of a bottom. What do I think about Cardano? Okay, well, the biggest reason to own Cardano is that no one wants to own Cardano. In other words, you know, the best reason to own Cardano is that it's all the way back to where it was in November of 2024 before the election. So it's unwound the entire election trade, as is many other cryptos. And it's an ISO 20022 coin. Now, should you tax loss sell Cardano? It actually looks like people have already had. I'm looking at the LuxAlgo, like red on red indicator for money flow. That's what I call it. I don't think it could look worse. I mean, Cardano looks like it, you know, you have to go back to like, you know, the abyss pre-election or the abyss on FTX to see the kind of like total give up trade that you've seen in these altcoins. I mean, like I said, you know, ISO 20022 coins, Cardano, Algorand, Hedera. Heard one word about any of those? None. XRP, XDC, Stellar, not one word. Those are altcoins that actually are going to be on the path to helping the banking system convert to crypto. It's like a legally mandated thing. That's where that idiotic little name comes from. This is happening. QNT was going up before this thing completely got, you know, before the Santa rally was just completely nuked. And we all had to sit and just deal with dire price action. Okay. Villas says, you know, yeah, talk to me about this market when Bitcoin finds a bottom, and this ain't it. Okay. Well, like I said, I don't think anyone's going to believe the first rally. And I think retail's going to sell the first rally on top of it. Like retail's going to see 6% up in Solana and go, oh, I'm out. I can't take it anymore. I understand. right? The price action on pre-Bank of Japan was such a nightmare. Now, this is also a good opportunity to start to discuss the holiday trade, the holiday algo trade, the most non-obvious thing in the whole world. So American Western holidays, they love to basically ruin your holidays. So Thanksgiving, let's review. Thanksgiving, everyone travels on Wednesday and Tuesday for a dinner on Thursday, and everyone sits around on Sunday and either goes home or watches football. This year, they got everybody on the upside, so they blew the shorts out the day before Thanksgiving, and then on Sunday night, they destroyed the longs. There was a double shot, 2 huge moves over a Western holiday. Interesting, the Orange Man just made Christmas Eve and the day after Christmas federal holidays. It's about time. I wish we could get on that like European standard of holidays. Okay, so we got more holidays, more days off, more days for these algos to take advantage of really thin markets. So if the forced selling is over with, I think algos are going to try to take it up over Christmas. I actually think the Orange Man may even call BlackRock or call somebody and say, take it up over Christmas. These guys need a win. I mean, did you see this address? This presidential address was allegedly supposed to be about a conflict in South America. It was nothing more than like a speed read marketing push on everything that they said that they've done right this year, which is fine. Right. But I mean, if that's what it's come down to, they're going to need the Genius Act, and they're going to need it with some shock value. Don't be surprised to see a Genius Act catalyst when the markets are closed over Christmas, right? Because they got to go into the new year with some momentum because they have none. They have none. And this matters for crypto. This is not priced in either. That, they got to start off next year the way they started off last year with a crypto win. Now, of course, last year, the crypto win was in fact for the Orange Man personally, as they sold over the top of everybody as they promised the world. And really the only people who got the world were geopolitical actors in Silicon Valley, right? We got nothing. We were supposed to get the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and the only thing that they built was like a Fort Knox of Bitcoin to be able to hold all the Bitcoin they may or may not take. I don't know. I don't want to say by force, but you want to have self-custody of your Bitcoin as you do for your gold and silver. So we didn't get anything we wanted. The government was supposed to moon our bags. They walked away. They did what they wanted. And, I think the saying is we fell for it. We in crypto fell for it. Now, I think since they have bags themselves, they have to deliver, or it's over for them in November. Crypto is the easy win, mainly because they're not issuing $9 trillion in government debt unless stablecoins and the entire ecosystem is legal. I think one of the most underreported stories was the fact that Coinbase made an announcement with a bank that's headquartered out of New Jersey, I believe, PNC Bank. I think Coinbase has got the heads up on the Genius Act already because they're partnering with banks to do crypto trading. I mean, how are they doing that without the Clarity Act? Some ways, like I said, the market completely ignored good news last week. Okay. Right. So Trent says Bitcoin won't go below the high from last cycle at 70. I think there were a lot of people looking at 70. I mean, they got 70 something this year. I think a lot of people thought they were going to get it again. I think that was the real shock, right? Everything went to zero. Everything went to zero. And everybody thought Bitcoin was going to attack 80 or go below 80, and it didn't happen. Nobody really looks at the fact that, they were trying to destroy Bitcoin last week and they couldn't do it. Like foreign actors, Russia and China FUD, market makers, all these guys selling at the market. Bitcoin just stood there. They took it all down. No, can you blame them? Like if I was Michael Saylor, I'd be like, you're never going to see this thing. Once this thing turns, whether that's now or early next year, you'll never see these prices again. I know you've heard that before, but I mean, I think Bitcoin somewhere in the 80s, plus or minus some stupid wick, you're going to be saying to yourself when Bitcoin is a strategic a strategic reserve asset. You're going to say to yourself when Bitcoin is a strategic world asset, reserve asset like gold and silver, you're going to be like, I could have bought it at 80 multiple times. And of course, Michael Saylor, is viewed as an idiot because he put $2 billion in. And as I said last week, no one seems to think that it matters that JP Morgan launched a stablecoin fund on ETH and Michael Saylor bought $2 billion worth of Bitcoin in the middle of a FUD storm. And I know no one's going to believe the rally, and that's good. You want this market to climb the wall of worry, right? You want the market to be desperate before Christmas, and you want it to be euphoric, say, after New Year's. You want everybody going, oh my God, it's the January effect, which is a sequel to the Santa rally. Whatever happens in the first week of the year, it carries over into the rest of the month and the rest of the year. That's a stock market thing. Literally. Like whatever the stock market does the first week of January is this like hyper scrutinized thing. Now, in the world of algos, I would take that way less seriously. But, if there's a good first week of January in crypto, everyone's going to have all the people that were selling yesterday will all have their rally caps on, especially if crypto can actually do something wild and Bitcoin can take out the 55-week moving average and get everyone all excited because, that's the equal and opposite reaction to whatever nonsense we saw yesterday, right? Where everyone was just like, I give up, I'm out, I'm done. Zcash up 12%. I mean, the cryptos that have a value proposition, if you have a value proposition, the sellers are probably tapped out. And if you go home today, New York at 5:00, London is done for the year. If you need to buy, I'm not sure who you're buying it from, especially if these four sellers are done. Now, yeah, okay, maybe I said that a month ago. All right, fine. But I mean, can you really tell me that price action from 2 days ago before the Bank of Japan didn't look like the opposite of, the hysterical buying we saw in January? It was the complete opposite. It was just total despair. It was total despair. All coins, all down 5-6% at a time. T-Bone reminding you to hit the like button. Burger Can Cook is in the house. Mike thinks Bitcoin is going to 67. I had something on my LuxAlgo chart at 68. Scared the living daylights out of me. Scared the daylights out of me. That price action last week was so scary. Like I thought it was over. Like I looked at it and go, wait a minute, is it over? And then I'm like, hold on a second. Stocks are up. And I saw that tweet about people selling 5,000 Bitcoin at a time. And I realized Bitcoin at 88 is nothing like, oh, wow, this is really looking so good because Bitcoin doesn't really start looking good, honestly, unless it's back above 100. But there was a lot of forced selling in Bitcoin. Like if you look at, like a money flow indicator, you had some very heavy puking. Let me see if I can get this up here. So if you look at this right here, you can see that you had some extremely heavy heaving in Bitcoin. Probably can't see it. So when the LuxAlgo money flow index is not only red, but starts to go bright red, that indicates that you have like total give up selling going on. Total give up selling. You have give up buying in silver and total give up selling in crypto in sort of like an unbelievable fashion. And ironically, most of the selling that occurred in the Bitcoin ETF, by the way, most of the red on red was actually done in December. A lot of people in like Thanksgiving, right? The real disaster for Bitcoin has actually passed. And I know a lot of people thought it was going lower. The Bitcoin ETF price action the other day was just, oh my God. Yesterday was so bad. You know, it's the Bitcoin ETF, which closed yesterday around 48, just below 48, tried 3 times in the last 4 days to get back above 50 and failed. Like, believe it or not, 50 in the Bitcoin ETF is a bigger level than anything you got going on in Bitcoin. I think if you see the Bitcoin ETF above 50, that's going to give people in equities confidence. I know that's laughable. You can't possibly think of the world that way, but I do. I think if they reclaim 50 over there, psychologically to them, that's going to be our equivalent of reclaiming 100, which I continue to believe is possible. The charts, the Gann case, you know, do you believe it or do you not believe it? Well, I guess you're just going to have to go to Patreon, or you're going to have to listen to Toby in the YouTube member area to find out. It's your medium of choice. Patreon is reports, right? If you're on Twitter, the links are in the bio. Also, if you're on Twitter, you know, there are posts everywhere showing you links to get to all these places. You know, if you support the channel, I can support you. Now, you're going to say, Bill, I'm completely wrecked. All right. Yeah, so am I. But ask yourself this question. What price targets did people have for Bitcoin this year? We had 150 to 180. We were on the low end. Some investment banks had 250. Galaxy Digital had 450. Kathy Wood had a million. BlackRock had, I don't know, was talking about 770. That's where there was a race at the beginning of the year to see what wild target you could have for Bitcoin for 2025. How many wild upside targets have you heard for 2026? Here's a hint. Not enough. Way too many. Way too few. No one is giga bullish for 2026 after watching gold and silver go up. Do not let this market lobotomize you. Do not let this market desensitize you to what can happen. And yeah, I know it's boomer in Bitcoin, in Ethereum, the stablecoin highway, in privacy. No one wants to touch any of this stuff. All the baby Bitcoins, the transactional Bitcoins, like Dash at 36. Are you crazy? You know, DeMark bottoms in Decred. Bitcoin Cash never really collapsed, right? Bitcoin Cash at 587. Bitcoin Cash has been here since August. Who's noticing? No one. But Bitcoin Cash is transactional Bitcoin. Roger Ver is going to get pardoned, or he's going to settle. And then you're going to have a spokesman for Bitcoin and transactional Bitcoin. Buck 52,000 says today is triple witching. You have a lot of options expiring. You know, Monday, final word, Monday, because of all these options that expire. If you don't understand that, don't worry about it. You will have a clean market. All the hedges will come off, and you will have a thin market. So if there's more selling that gets done, I guess we'll know. But every day, starting today, that the bears don't crush it is a day where you get the signal that they're out of ammo and the Santa rally is on. Okay. Misfit 1382, right? Still at it. Warm on. All right. All the YouTube members, T-Bone, Crypto Crazy, right? Stefan Burger Can Cook. Welcome. Welcome to our show. Guys giving me jewels and floating hearts. Thank you. Laughing Disco, right? Supermat is here from the UK. Welcome. We want to welcome everybody on Twitter and on TikTok. Okay. Alpha is here looking at ApeCoin. Welcome. All right. Alpha Video, Clint Perry, Gary Stewart. Bill, do you think we can hit 100 before New Year's? Well, bro, you can read the case for it in Patreon, but I don't see any reason why we can't retest the 55-week moving average, right? Noah Floods wants to get after pudgy penguins, right? Livid says, give the Russians their money back, right? How does the Solana issue affect Anti and Matrix? Easy. Antivirus would be the privacy utility. John McAfee meme coin, and Matrix would be the privacy token. It's very simple. This is not investment advice, but if I had Solana, I would be moving the Solana into something that had a value proposition, even if it was on Solana, right? It's like dump the Solana and buy something on Solana that has value, not investment advice. I am not taking any lawsuit risk personally. I'm out. Maybe that's the signal Solana is going to 1,000. I don't know. I'm not doing it. Let's go, Spartans. Gary Stewart says, this is my morning coffee. Welcome to the show. Welcome, right? Stefan, memes are dead. Get a real project. I agree. The Matrix coupon, the Matrix token being released by the McAfee people, that's going to have its own blockchain. That's not going to be Solana. And we have the SJESKY, Supermat, Knox Bill, all the members, Warmon, Misfit, Union Crypto. What's going on? All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today. Santa Rally caps on. We will see you tomorrow.